Hey everyone, I am IamT-REx, and today I'm doing my review for Hellboy from 2004. This is a film by Guillermo Del Toro, and this is my second review in my little mini-series of me reviewing Guillermo Del Toro films. Recently I reviewed Pacific Rim, and next Tuesday I'll be reviewing Hellboy 2: The Golden Army. Anyways, with that out of the way, let's get into my review of Hellboy. Anyways, Hellboy is a movie from 2004 directed by Guillermo Del Toro, and stars Ron Perlman, John Hurt, Selma Blair, Rupert Evans, and Carl Roden. This movie is based on the Dark Horse comic series, and this movie came out in the early 2000s when most companies are just throwing out these comic book movies. So out of that era of those movies coming out, this is one of the movies of those comic book early day movies that was actually really unique at the time. But anyway, let's get into the narrative. During World War II, the Nazis are trying to communicate with higher powers and end up summoning a little demon who was raised by one of the soldiers who stopped the Nazis that night. Now an evil figure has returned and is once again trying to bring again the end of the world. Now when it comes to comic book movies, this one has a very different type of story, and it has kind of a Cthulhu feel to it, and that really makes it stand out. The movie's plot is very original, and I like that they go for these really interesting concepts that are kind of out there and that most superhero movies wouldn't go for. That said, as much as I love the concepts that we get in the narrative, I think the pacing here is kind of weird. We go from these killer assassin Nazis killing people, then we cut back to Hellboy spying on this girl he likes, and there's a lot of that in the movie where it's just this back and forth. Now this tone is very dark and mystic, so it kind of goes jarring when we go from a super dark Cthulhu type of thing and then just cut back to something random where it doesn't really have that feeling. It kind of is jarring. And since that entire storyline is just so out there, sometimes the movie kind of struggles to stay grounded. This does lead to some tone shifts that really make this film a bit too jarring. That said though, this story is very original, and I think it being a bit over the place tone-wise, I think it's kind of okay here because there are not as many comic book movies really shooting for the stars like this one does. This one goes so out there, and I really respect the concepts it goes for, so I'm kind of able to give it more of a pass for that jarring and not great tone and pacing. Also, let's talk about the action. The action with Hellboy is awesome. I love how Hellboy is reluctant when he fights, and he isn't exactly like a precise or good fighter. He's just very strong, which leads to him winning a lot of fights that he really shouldn't win, and that's really fun to see how he kind of stumbles out of these terrible situations that most people would die from. These action fights might be some of the best parts of the movie because the action is great, along with it just being hilarious as he's like doing these one-liners as he's fighting through these things.
It's for you! You're so
Also, the things that he is fighting are so cool. There are these awesome creatures as well, and the character design and the villains here are just awesome as well. Like there's this rad dagger hand Nazi, and whenever he is on screen in his fight scenes, he is rad. The action here is great, and the distinct feel it has really makes it stand out compared to other comic book movies, as it's more fun and the fights being more chaotic in nature really helps it stand out, and these fights are just great. Now, since I was talking about Hellboy, let's talk about these characters. I love Hellboy as the character. He is played so well in this movie by Ron Perlman, and he is so fun to watch because he's this reluctant hero. He only does his job because he has to, and it's hilarious how good he is at it, but he has no real plan and just hates his job. Also, his character is just so interesting because of the way he is from another world, and he has to figure out how he's going to live here. Since he is a demon from another world, he has to figure out how to get his humanity as well. I think also one of the standouts here is his dad as well, who's played by John Hurt. He is this lovable old man and the father to Hellboy, and he has some great characterization as you really buy his relationship with his son Hellboy. I would say that is probably the best relationship in the movie and really is the heart of the film. Hellboy also has a love interest, and she's fine, but I don't think we get enough time to really flesh her out. I think she kind of gets thrown in there in the second act. Same with the blue guy played by Doug Jones. Like, he's rad and got a great personality. I just wish we learned more about these two characters more. They really feel like they could have been great if they had just been fleshed out a little bit more. And the same issue kind of goes with the villains. They are not really fleshed out. They're just these evil Nazis, and I guess that's a good enough reason to take them down, but their plans are just to destroy the world and bring the end of all humanity, and that's pretty generic. The one cool villain is the insane blade Nazi guy I brought up before. He's the standout, especially during the awesome scenes where we get to see what he actually looks like underneath the mask. He is a great slasher character and is awesome. But when it comes to the main villain like Rasputin, he's just not interesting. He just never really gets fleshed out, and he doesn't really have any motives or stakes other than just to destroy the world. So the villains just aren't that interesting. This movie really nails the main character and the main relationship he has with his dad, and his dad is great as well. But the rest of the supporting cast and villains don't really get fleshed out as much as I would like to see, leading to a really strong protagonist, but left with a weaker supporting cast. Now let's talk about the direction, and this is directed by Guillermo Del Toro, and he has a style that really meshes here with this, as he is able to make these weird creatures look realistic and work in this world. The tone and look easily is the thing that makes this film stand out, as there aren't as many comic book movies that go so faithfully after this type of source material that is so out there. He goes for this very different type of comic book source material, and he makes it realistic. He does a great job making this film feel real, and makes a very stylistic film that really makes it feel like a unique movie in the superhero genre. Hellboy is a super unique movie, as it tackles a very different type of narrative that might turn off some people, but it has a fantastic protagonist along with some really rad action scenes, and this is a movie that's got a unique style which really makes it stand out. The supporting cast isn't really there, and the villains are very forgettable, and this isn't one of my favorite superhero movies of all time, but it was a fun time to watch through the entire movie, and a very different type of superhero movie. So with that, I'm going to say that Hellboy is good. Now if you want another movie with Nazis going after a mystical artifact, I'm going to recommend a classic in Indiana Jones Raiders of the Lost Ark. And if you want another Guillermo Del Toro film with awesome imagery, and is actually the sequel to this movie, I'm going to recommend with Hellboy 2: The Golden Army. But what are your thoughts on Hellboy 2004? It's definitely a different type of comic book movie, so I'd love to hear your thoughts down below in the comment section. Anyways, next time I will be reviewing the sequel to this film and Hellboy 2: The Golden Army to wrap up my little Guillermo Del Toro movie reviews. Anyways, when that comes out, I'll see you then. Bye.